Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is stop fixing, create. So rather than miring ourselves in the problem and the limitations of the problem, which is generated from the past, how about if we create, if we generate and allow ourselves to be called into the future as an emergent possibility that's not defined by past limitations. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop, and allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Rosalind. So good to have you here with us this morning, and so good to have everybody else joining us. Today, we're talking about stop fixing, create. And we're talking about sort of trying to fix problems. And the problem with problem solving, or the problem with trying to fix problems, is that our response to whatever that circumstance is bound by, is constrained by, defined by whatever the perceived problem is. It's emerging from the past. It's a relic of the past. And so if we use the problem to define, problem is in big air quotes, by the way, if we use the problem as a jumping off point, what happens is it defines our solution. It constrains our possibilities. So an example is this amazing story from a client of mine who is responsible for ending fracking in New York State. And you can look her up. Her name is Helen Slache. And in this situation with fracking, the problem was the proliferation of fracking, and the solution was to contain it, to legislate it, to make rules around it. And all these different factions were aligned that that was how you deal with this kind of problem. Regulatory bodies and even environmental groups. And Helen was staunch in her stand of no, there's another option, and that is a future without fracking, just without it, not like how to contain it, but to eliminate it. And over the course of 10 years and campaigning in communities and enlisting the support and energy of so many people who made this happen, made this impossible dream a reality. New York doesn't have fracking. And it's kind of a miraculous thing, but where it originated from was not looking at how do we contain fracking, but what's the future that we want? And the future was a future that was healthy and didn't include that technology, that didn't include that destructive, invasive, polluting, dangerous practice that so much of our country just accepts as a norm. And um, it is a bold step to imagine a future that has different foundations than the present in which we exist. And I know there's a big debate around how to change or transform a system. And there's a lot of support for working within the system to transform the system. And there may be situations where that's actually possible. However, what we want to notice is that a system has its own momentum or inertia, even probably inertia. Like the bigger an organization, the slower it is to be able to change. Change occurs at a glacial pace because there's so many resistances, because there is so much inertia, because there's such a deep entrenchment of belief and structure and protocol, etc. And so I think it was Buckminster Fuller who said, don't try to change the way things are, create a better way that galvanizes attention and energy and momentum. And I think in this moment, if we look at the state of the world and we look at all the problems, again, air quotes, but the things that we define as problems and challenges and what's wrong with things. When I start thinking about that, I don't know about you, but when I start thinking about that, my head practically explodes. You know, it's like there's no path from here to there that I can discern. And so rather than focusing on all those problems, what if we were instead to put our attention on creating the world the way we desire for it to be, generating systems and patterns and behaviors, even within ourselves, or especially within ourselves, that support the way we desire the world to be. So I've been thinking a lot lately about this whole insanity that we don't even identify as insanity of war. And so often the intention of war, well, what are the intentions of war? One is acquisition, expansion, right? Trying to dominate and control and contain and take possession of something. Another function of war, so to speak, is protection, defense from somebody coming to take, or an entity coming to take possession. And somehow we imagine that through war, we can somehow achieve peace. And I would like to imagine, I don't know if it's true, but I would like to imagine that we desire peace, that we desire a planet that is peaceful, that we desire relationships with one another and with ourselves that are peaceful. And if we look at this was really interesting. I was going through some books and I came upon this book about the quirkiness of English. And there was a chapter in it about the violence of English language. And when we think about success or winning, we use terms like, I'm going to crush it. I'm going to dominate it. I'm going to decimate that other team. I'm going to destroy them. And this is just a very, very mild sampling of some of our very common language that is so deeply combative, so deeply pugilistic, so deeply aggressive and violent. And we talk about fighting the good fight. We talk about the war on drugs, or even the notion of being a survivor is surviving a fight in so many ways, right? I've conquered cancer, for instance. And if we listen to the language, it kind of gives us an insight into the zeitgeist of our culture. And if we want to transform our world, we need to create something new. We need to be looking at ourselves and what is it to be peaceful? What is it to not fight and struggle and war? What is it to what's available otherwise? What can we create? Maybe we can create some kind of collaboration and community and support. I mean, if I look into what I would desire the future to be, it would be where we're in communion with one another, where we support one another, where we can trust one another, where we can work together to create beautiful things. where we take care of each other. I don't know if that's your vision, but it is a vision of mine. And the question is, how do we even, is there a path from here to there? And my inclination is to believe that that path begins with each of us practicing peace. How do we do that? Well, first thing, we need to be present. We need to be present to our own responses, our own reactivity, to notice what's going on. And if we're present, it's only in a moment of presence that we have the opportunity for choice. It's only when we are awake to the moment that we can actually create. And yes, we can create based on the past, but we also have this really remarkable kind of magical capability to be creating from the future. When we imagine the world that we would like to create, what's possible? It stretches our capacity in a positive way. And it's interesting how we have such a culture of imagining a future that is dystopian. We see all these movies that are made about the end of the world and all these dystopian outcomes. But what about a world where we're in cooperation and collaboration? Maybe it's not as dramatic somehow. Maybe it's not as stimulating because it's peaceful. I don't know that that's true. Peacefulness, like anybody who's ever experienced deep, deep, deep love, moments of unconditional, blissful kinds of experiences, knows that that's a very profound experience in a very profound state, and witnessing the beauty of the world and experiencing that and experiencing connection, deep, deep connection, that it's quite enlivening and not in any way boring. But maybe it just doesn't play as well on film. I'm not sure. I'm thinking that that's probably true. But I think that there's value in really being the change we want to see, embodying. I think this is the only way it really starts happening, is if we embody that presence that we wish to see in the world. And it's not like it's an easy thing. Even this notion, or maybe particularly this notion of peace in a world where, we talk about how business is cutthroat. Like, what an image, right? We have such a history, humans on the planet, not all cultures, but most cultures, we have such a history of violence, and we have elevated it to an art form in so many ways, to make surgical strikes in warfare, to have drone-based warfare, machines, employing machines where somebody can sit behind a console and destroy people and property. And I don't see any kind of logical end to it. I don't see any kind of actual linear path to an outcome where we find communion with one another and with the planet and with nature. And my only hope, and it is actually a hope that I don't think is based in delusion, like not a delusional sort of hope, is that consciousness itself is shifting and gaining a momentum, gaining an energy that at some point will jump to the next quantum state in a nonlinear fashion that could perhaps make things like war obsolete, that we could actually wake up one day and experience the absurdity of war and so many of our behaviors. And maybe it's an impossible dream, but I do see shifts of consciousness occurring through my lifetime. I've noticed that there is more and more conversation, collective conversation about awakening, about responsibility. And it may be that this climate crisis serves to waken us more fully as a collective, where we get to recognize that the only path forward is together and depending upon one another, and that the othering that we have so invested in for millennia has run its course. And I think that as we entertain that kind of vision, we start bringing it into being. We bring it into and magnify it in the field of consciousness in which we all reside. It's bringing light, truly bringing light. And I think there are so many of us that have that commitment to bringing light. And still, we are in so many ways under the thrall of a culture that has such a history and is living from that history rather than from the potentials of the future. And I think it does start with each of us to be the change we wish to see, to be the embodiment of what's possible. I think we have that potential. And I remember and try to remember more and more and more frequently to ask the question, what would love do? And if we can, it just moves me to even say that right now. If we can live from that question, if we can put more attention on that inquiry, what would love do? I think our lives can open up so much more completely to ourselves, to one another, to nature, to life itself. So that's the invitation, is to guide ourselves with that question, what would love do? And that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. And as always, it is such a deep privilege to share this time together. And I so appreciate you. So until next time, so much love.